celebrations on Friday and the Jewish holidays. And Harley was part of our group for the 3 months that he was at University Living. And Svi asked me to help with this funeral. And now I'd like to introduce Rabbi Ora Huvia.
Adonai noten, Adonai lakach, Ahishem Adonai mevarach. God gives, God takes. May God's name be praised. We're here to honor the life of a man many knew as Harley Flanders. His Hebrew name, Menachem Mendel ben Michael Chaim v'Dorothée Silva Yisrael. Several family members are gathered here and will offer words honoring the man and his life. And in addition, there's a brother who lives in Israel and who's going to be joining us via video cam. So he's with us in spirit as well. Zvi, could I ask you up first?
My father loved to talk publicly, and he always came well prepared with lengthy comments. I hope not to take too much time today, but I do have some things I want to cover. And I've decided to talk mostly about his last few months of life. Many of you knew him at various other points in his life, but I spent a lot of time with him recently, and I watched him die, and I learned some things about that, and I want to talk about those experiences. A little bit of housekeeping. There's some maps in the back on how to get from the cemetery to Harley's house, where we're going to be this afternoon for remembrances and being together, and you're all more than invited to come. This photograph on top of the coffin is from Harley's high school graduations, and it's in color, but it's painted. It's I guess that's how black and white photographs were retouched in the early 40s. My father died on Shabbat last Friday morning at about 6 a.m. Shabbat became rather special to him these last few months, and that's why I asked Ed to join us, because Ed came into the University Living as a volunteer and ran a Shabbat service for years there, and my father was very happy about that and joined the service almost immediately after he got there 3 months ago. He sent me on various errands to help out. He made sure that I brought in challah every week, and he told me exactly where to buy it and how to prepare it. Just bring in half a loaf, put the other half in a plastic bag with a wire tie on it, and put it in the fridge for a week, and then I said, I can bring you a fresh one every week. He says, no, that's not necessary. Cut the challah in half, and then the next week he said, I need some matchas herring. I said, matchas herring, I like to buy that up at Monahan's fishery here. He said, no, you go to Hiller's, and you go in the front door and you turn right, and you go all the way to the end of the aisle, and you turn left, and you go about halfway down, and then in the little counter of the refrigerator, there'll be the little jars of matchas herring. I said, well, that stuff I got at Monahan's very good. He said, no, it's the wrong kind. You get, and so I did. I brought him the matchas herring. When I went to University Living on Saturday, they told me that several of the staff really wanted to come, and I don't see any staff here. I wanted to recognize them and thank them personally, and maybe I told them that, and that's why they decided not to come. I don't know. They also have work schedules. But they were terrific, and they were very kind to my father, and several of them grew fond of him. And I was hoping they would be here, but I wanted to mention the the staff. About a month ago, my father told me to go to his house and get the directory of the math department. He told me exactly where it was in his house and what it looked like. It was this document. He said, go get the phone directory for the math department and bring it to me. I want to have a dinner here at University Living for the widows of departed mathematicians from the department. I want to do that for him. And he actually drew up a list of names from here and started calling around. He never pulled that off, but this was about a month ago. He was still interested in other people and interested in what was going on in the community and trying to help people and planning this. I see a list of 7 names here. He was organizing what room we were going to have it at University Living and what food I was going to bring in and how these people were going to get there and arranging transportation. And he was very involved in that process. And I thought that was noteworthy and wanted to share that story about how my father, when he was no longer able to walk and no longer able to stand on his own, and people were asking me how he was doing and what he was doing. What he was doing was sitting there and thinking, what he, in many ways, always did best. A few weeks after that, I noticed on the monthly schedule that they post at University Living a large infinity symbol under the Friday the 12th of June. Excuse me, July, 2 weeks ago. And I noticed above that, 2 p.m. math lecture with Harley Flanders, infinite and finite. So I said, Harley, you giving a lecture here? He said, yeah. I got to get ready. So he sat there with notes. I looked at the notes, and they were very terse and very symbolic, and you know, there'd just be like one line with 4 or 5 symbols on it. And I know a little math, and I said, are you going to explain this? Because this looks a little dense. He said, oh yeah, don't worry, I'm going to go through it. Here's also a copy of the daily schedule for Friday, July 12th, 2013, which lists the lecture. I videotaped the lecture similarly to the way we're videotaping this, and it is available on YouTube for those of you who want to see it. He was as active as he could be throughout all of his life, and the last months of his life he stayed active. He was always asking for chess games. I don't know if he was thrilled or disappointed to find out that one of the fellow residents of University Living was a former state chess champ who he never came close to beating while he was there, but he did get a few games. Once I told my father that I had talked to Paul and I found out he had no chess books there at all, and that I asked him if he wanted one. He said yes, and I told my father I was going to bring him one. He says, no, we're not giving him any advantages here. But I did anyway. I brought this document from his house about 3 weeks ago to the nursing home, and he recognized it from about as far away as the middle row here. He said, oh, that's my English project from high school. Mathematical Puzzles and Amusements, Harley Flanders, January 8th, 1941. He's born in 25, so you do the math. So it's typewritten, page after page. He says, you know, I said, I see you got an E+ on it. He said, yeah, they took off points because I misspelled a word, which of course is part of my life story, is misspelling, but we won't go into that. This isn't about me. But I said, E+ sounds pretty good. What was the top score? He said S. S? Superior. Okay, so he didn't get an S on this. But a few weeks later, a friend was visiting him, and she picked this up and read the last paragraph to me, which I haven't read this. I hadn't read it at all then. And I want to end with that paragraph, which I thought was quite lovely. So let me just make sure I've covered all my notes here. I do want to say 2 more things before I read that, and then I'll be done. First of all, I want to explain these two wood animals that are on top of his casket. I explained the picture. These are going to be interred with my father. What's remarkable about them is not that they're fairly simple and crude little wood animals, and they were made by a friend of mine in southern Indiana, but they're made out of a piece of wood that came out of Purdue Hall when they tore it down in 1963. My father took a lot of the timbers and for years would make picture frames out of this wood. And if you go to the house today and you look around, a lot of the picture frames in the house are made out of this same wood. About 3 years ago, he asked me to give it to a friend of mine who's a cabinet maker in southern Indiana, and a few months ago he said, "Did Rob ever make anything for me out of that wood?" And I said, as a matter of fact, he did. And I brought him those animals, and he enjoyed them, and he showed them to everybody who came to visit, and had them nearby and asked to see them frequently. So I don't know why, but that wood was important to him, so I'm carrying it along, and in fact going to bury him with those little animals. All right, so this is the last paragraph of Mathematical Puzzles and Amusements by Harley Flanders, his first paper, first of some 100 papers and many books. The purpose of this thesis has been to show that while mathematics may seem dull and very difficult to many people, it is the basis of practically every puzzle which requires thinking that has ever attained popularity. In fact, the same might be said for many games of cards, dice, and others. While it is true that man could exist without puzzles and amusements, he could not truly live without them. For a great part of man's recreation is based on these amusements, which in turn are based on mathematics.
So I know that there are several people who are going to get up and talk, and I'm just going to trust you to, as you're ready, take your turns.
I'm Josh. I'm Harley's nephew. He's my dad's brother. And before I speak, I'd like to read something that his son David wrote. Couldn't be with us today, he's in Israel. So these are David's words. A rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar. The barman takes one look at them and says, "Get out, my father just died and I'm in no mood for jokes." Harley loved jokes. Some of us will find our computing time a little poorer for not seeing his jokes. There's a saying that if you aren't a liberal when you're young, you have no heart, and if you aren't a conservative when you're old, you have no brain. Well, Harley was a notable exception to this rule. No matter how many years passed since his birth, he remained a liberal. Harley was a great man, a giant among men. He had a huge heart, which he filled with the love he held for his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. Stop. Harley was a human, as human as the rest of us. Sure, he had a bunch of college degrees. So do most of those assembled here today. Sure, he lived long enough to see 3 generations of descendants, but so do millions of other people. Sure, he was a published author. So is every other published author. It's true that he could assemble a hi-fi set on the dining room table, build a crystal radio from scratch, build and use a darkroom, and produce carpentry at a level which still impresses professionals. So can hobbyists all over the world. He could sing arias while accompanying himself on the piano, and play at least 5 different sizes of recorder as well. So can at least competent musicians in any world-famous symphony orchestra, with the possible exception of the percussionists. He taught himself to perform computers in several languages, and then wrote an award-winning program to help students learn calculus. The Denzians of the American and Israeli Silicon Valleys, and evidently half of India share these talents. Fly over the Masai Mara Park in Kenya in a hot air balloon on his 70th birthday? A bag of ballast can do that. Keep on driving after his 87th birthday? Welcome to Florida. Recognize hundreds of different bird species. Bird watchers are so common that a recent Hollywood movie was devoted to them. Visit the Galapagos Island in his 70s? Well, it's not like he was piloting the ship. But speaking of maritime matters, he did teach himself enough about sailing to get several sailing licenses in Madison. Well, how hard could that have been? Even the captain of the Titanic accomplished that. He could drive 500 miles a day without getting tired. So could any trucker. He built aquariums and a terrarium easily purchased in any pet shop. He could ride a bicycle while holding on to a streetcar, which lots of kids could do, although not all of them made it to adulthood in one piece. He was an excellent chess player, but could play chess with a 7-year-old and not make the child feel stupid. He often studied chess books to improve his game. Thousands of professional chess players do that every day. He never had to struggle with math the way most people do. For nickel, counting tightwad, nice, he could be extremely generous. He was a fervent Zionist and contributor to Israeli causes, eventually living there for almost a decade and contributing to Israeli academia, while simultaneously editing the American Mathematical Monthly. He was a commanding presence. When he walked into a room, everyone noticed. When he found out that Yitzhak Rabin was sharing a plane with him, Harley sat down next to him in order to discuss the proper running of the country. On other occasions, he walked into the offices or homes of leading Israeli politicians in general to discuss strategies and tactics with them, his lack of knowledge holding him back not a whit. Every one of these accomplishments by itself is impressive. Now think hard and try to come up with anyone else who could do all of these things and do them really, really well. But he had trouble with basic arithmetic. Foreign languages were a mystery to him, and at one point he came to the conclusion that Hebrew grammar was a devious plot to make his life miserable. His vast musical knowledge of all Western music up to the end of the 19th century left him no room to appreciate anything other than classical music. Anyone with the dissenting views on religion, morals, politics, or family was simply mistaken. And he changed many of those views as often as did Groucho Marx, who said, "Those are my principles, and if you don't like them, well, I have others." A poor sense of direction led to his keeping a compass in his car and engaging in fruitless arguments, which he invariably lost with GPSs. He had a great deal of trouble showing affection. He couldn't abide sitcoms or TV sports, yet found Benny Hill and TV wrestling marvelous entertainment. He pronounced all musicals an inferior art form, with the glaring exceptions of the ones he loved. He failed at marriage, so do half the couples in America. So although each of Harley's accomplishments and failures could easily be matched, Harley was a Renaissance man. A man for all seasons, a jack of all trades, a person best described by the Hebrew term Ish Eshkalot. His family and friends, including all those gathered here today, will miss him greatly. I'd like to say simply, he'll be sorely missed, but Harley hated the use of the passive and rebuked me for using it in my writing. Therefore, as far as we're concerned, Harley was a great man, a giant among men. He had a huge heart which he filled with the love he held for his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Rest in peace, Harley. May your memory be a blessing. Yehei Zikaro Baruch. That was from his son David. I was lucky to have a different experience with Harley as his nephew. I got to appreciate the best in him, and as a child growing up, he would often sit me down at my computer and explain to me for hours about how to use it and how to create sine, cosine, tangent curves, which of course I understood at 8 years old. Don't they teach this to you? And very early on, I finagled out of his brother David, Harley's birth given name, which isn't Harley. But when I used it with him, he took me aside and said, "Don't ever use that with me again. My name is Harley." And being the jokester that I was, I said, well, I'm going to come up with a new nickname for you that would encompass all of your qualities and traits and maybe soften you up a bit. So I gave him the nickname Cuddles. And for my teenage year, he was just Uncle Cuddles. And I'll tell you that really brought him down to my level. We were not talking about math anymore. We were talking about other things. So growing up with Cuddles, I could appreciate his sense of humor and his perspective. And as I got older, and I think he started to appreciate my being an adult and being able to share adult topics. We often shared jokes and dirty stories, and I would come to his house and we would watch films, and he would say, have you seen the Apu trilogy from India? And I'd say, no, I haven't seen that. Well, give me a piece of paper. I'm making you a list of the movies you need to see to be a proper adult. And since movies is my profession, I thought, well, I should probably pay attention to this. And so I'm working my way through several lists of movies, many of which you can only find on VHS, because they haven't been transferred to DVD yet, but they're classics of the BBC and throughout history. So the last time I saw Harley was Father's Day 2 years ago. He came to visit, my wife and I, and at 85 years old, he still insisted on driving. We couldn't drive. He drove us, and he orchestrated the entire tour, and we went to a deli, and we went to a Botanic Gardens. On one trip, I think we saw a classical concert in the afternoon, only to be followed by going to a film festival that evening. At both locations, Harley was the star. Everywhere we went, he was recognized. People shook his hand. Professor Flanders, is that you? At the Botanic Gardens. Yes, I'm with my family, please, He was a rock star. He didn't want to be bothered by his fans. He didn't want to sign autographs, and he just wanted to be with his family. And his passion for his family and his interest in other people and his passion for life was contagious. And his excitement over numbers and sitting me down at my computer at that early age, is only matched by his excitement for life and for good food and great cheeses. I still have the Zoxenberg orange juice squeezer that is a 35-pound behemoth that he carried home, several of from Israel. The greatest orange juice squeezer in the world. You will never find a better one, according to Harley. And so all these things we take with us, and I remember, and he's sorely missed.
I do have ADHD, so if I go onto different topics of Harley, automatically, sorry. So, I was adopted from Guatemala, and adopted by my parents now. But I've always known Harley as my grandpa. And I know he's a mathematician. He's a great mathematician. But pretty much what I knew him for was a loving grandpa that I looked up to. I might cry, I don't know. He was a great person in my life. I'll never forget him. came to Purdue together for his friend's funeral. That was a really great experience. I had spent a long time with him, so that was really good. I remember, I don't know, Harley was just a really good grandpa. I loved him, and I'll miss him a lot. I know this might not seem as funny as what everybody's been saying, like jokes that people have been saying. Harley's been saying, but after I found out he had died, the next day I checked my Facebook, and I got a Facebook friend request from Harley Flanders, and I was kind of surprised. I was like, wait, what? And yeah, I felt really happy, and even though after a while I knew it was from my dad, I was really still really happy. And actually the other day, me and Esther were in our room, and we were looking at the window, and there was this moth, really colorful moth. It was pretty big too, maybe about this big, and it was just staying out our window, and it had been staying there for about a whole day almost, and it almost felt like his presence was with us. He was like the moth, pretty much. He was like us too. I've seen him for already. He always took care of me and Nathan. We would come over to his house sometimes, and he would let us sleep over, and I remember those times. We played ping pong with him. He would always beat us, but it was okay. And one time I was really scared of just sleeping on my own, so he came in. And I didn't really think he would do it at all, but I asked him if he could sleep it. I was really scared, so he came in and lied down with me until I fell asleep, so I was really happy for that. I miss you, Harley. He looks so young in that picture. I know I only knew him for about 20 years, so seems like I've known him for all his whole life. Oh yeah, there's this other time where he was trying to teach me some math, and I totally didn't know what he was saying, and he did kind of get frustrated with me, but I knew in the long run he just wanted me to learn math and try to help me. And really, just hearing his voice, I loved him a lot. And I know he loved me a lot too. Even when I was going through kind of hard times, he still was on my side too. I'm not trying to say this because my parents are by my side too, but I'm just trying to make this about Harley too. So, I'll miss him a lot. I always feel like he's with me, so. I can't open it.
just like to share some of the experiences I had with Harley and Svi. I'm really happy to hear that he so looked forward to coming on Fridays, because my first experience with Harley, the very first Shabbat, we did it on Friday morning, and Shabbat, of course, starts in the evening. But after he sat there very stoic, I mean, he sang, but it was though I was being critiqued the whole time. and I'm sure that's other people have had that same experience. So afterwards, he comes up to me and he says, "You're doing a mitzvah. I enjoyed it, but it's spiritually, it just doesn't touch me." And he said, and I'm going to tell you what the most important spiritual experience I had. It was, I forget the woman's name. It was a rabbi, I guess, or a cantor. He said it was 5 years ago in the emergency room in the hospital. That was the most significant spiritual experience I've ever had. So I figured, what can I do? How can I beat that, just singing songs. However, he came every Friday when he was able to. He loved to sing Ma Tovu, How Goodly Are Thy Tents, O Jacob. And he also sang Ein Keloheinu. And when Svi, when you came, Svi came for one Shabbat, and I could see Harley had such nachas from you being there. Svi has a very beautiful voice, kind of a cantorial voice, and he really added a lot. But being there with Svi, you could just see he was sitting up taller, and he was smiling, and it was just a wonderful experience. So that was very important for your father. And of course, the challah, and he had to have the challah and also the hearing. So I remember him as somebody that had a very lovely voice, who really enjoyed the singing and actually wanted to take care of other people. There were times that somebody would just be having a difficult time, and he would want to check in and see what he could do when he was able to do it. Very gracious, very really cared about other people. So those are my memories of Harley.
I'm Rachel Flanders, Harley's niece, Josh's sister, Svi's cousin, and my father. I want to start by mentioning my father, Staunton, who was Harley's brother, who's also in hospice now in Highland Park, Illinois, but very much wanted to be here. And the fact that he can't be here is very painful for him. So, as he said yesterday, all my body parts aren't working. You'd have to pee for me every hour if I were going to go in the car with you. But Harley and my father had a very long, close relationship, never any ruptures. And my father was saying yesterday, I'm the messenger of his words, that his brother, my father has a Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's, as their father had. And my father's in and out, but he's very lucid right now. And he said, my bro was a very iconoclastic man, and he managed to live in a world, very circumscribed world, extremely comfortably, very content with himself. And it's really true. I want to acknowledge the people who aren't here, who also, because there's many significant people, but there are few significant people, including my father, David, also Harley's ex-wife, June, who was a huge part of our life and a huge part of Harley's, and they maintained a relationship over the years. And for her, I'm sure this too is a very significant loss. and she's in Israel. And also I want to acknowledge my mother, who, again, despite divorces, had a long, significant relationship with Harley, and they stayed in touch over the years. So I just wanted to say a few things. I was riding on a plane home from vacation the day before Harley died, and I was coming back from Rome, and I was bored and I couldn't sleep, and I decided to flip on the computer in front of me and play a game of chess. And I hadn't played chess in many years, maybe 5 years. And I beat the computer. And I thought, Harley would be so proud of me. Because a lot of my childhood, again, all the academics aside, my relationship with Harley was a very personal one. It was one of growing up. It was one that involved lots of food and lots of family time and lots of music and Verdi and smelly cheeses and watching him shave his thick beard with an electric razor, only electric, and the nostrils electric, and the plucking of the gray hairs when they started coming in to defy the aging process. He had us pluck them. Valis ice cream, and, you know, to my kids, Zoe and Jacob, who are also not here, lots of funny kind of riffing about his outfits, his clothing. I don't know if any of the people here noticed that, his clothing. But, you know, the belts were up to under, and the Birkenstocks and the socks. He was a man of, and he admired it. Good wool, cashmere, scarves, sweaters, wool hats, only the best jackets early on from London. Anyhow, I beat the computer, and then I came back. Svi had called me, and I missed the call while I was away, and I woke up at 8 in the morning to call Svi to say, is everything okay? And he told me Harley had died that night. And Harley played chess with me all the time, as much as I wanted to. He taught me how to play chess. We spent tons of time. And again, not being my father, I didn't experience the criticalness that I think his sons certainly did. But he'd give up a rook, a queen, but he'd never let me win. And I never beat him. And I beat the computer. So, I don't know. I don't know what that means. Anyhow, I guess I want to just say, mainly for my father, a goodbye to Harley. And I'll say that at the cemetery because my father said that it's very hard to conceptualize for him the death. And I think it's very hard for us all to conceptualize that. And as you get older, you know, there just are more of them. So the thing to do is to treasure the moments and the hours with the people we love. And then the people who die, we hold them inside of us. And we get to relish and treasure them in there. That's the way it just keeps going.
I wanted to offer Psalm 23. and then we'll take a drive to the cemetery. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi, lo echsar, bino desheyavitzeni, bino desheyavitzeni, al mei menuchot yanahaleni, nafshi yeshovet, yancheni b'maglei tzedek, amen menuchot yenaleni, nafshi yeshovet, yancheni b'maglei tzedek, b'maglei tzedek, l'man shemo, l'man shemo, gam ki elech b'gates ha'mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged tzorirai, deshanta b'shemen, deshanta b'shemen roshi, deshanta b'shemen roshi, hosi revaya, achtov v'chesed, yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, gather ourselves together again at the graveside. As we're arriving, it would be helpful for the rest of us who are gathered here to honor Harvey to make an attempt to form a couple of lines through which the family will walk so they can feel the support of community as they take the front seats.
This concludes the services here at the chapel. On behalf of the family, I'd like to thank you all for attending. And at this time, I'm going to